Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the InnerFight podcast. Hope you enjoyed last week's show, and I hope you're ready for a little bit of a, pardon the pun, ride in this week's show. It's just me, and I'm talking about my experience of when, in December of 2022, Robert Jones and I decided to ride our mountain bikes from the highest point of the UAE, Jebel Jais, all the way back to the gym. To be honest, we had no idea how long it would take. We had an approximation. We knew also approximately how long it was, and we'd never ridden this far on mountain bikes before. So it was a lot about adventure. That's what this show is all about. As I take us through where this idea came from, the origins of the idea of how it was and how then it played out, which were hugely, hugely different, what we learned along the way, and what we think of it since. This is episode 798 of the InnerFight podcast. From Jebel Jais to InnerFight. No matter where you are in the world, thanks a lot for tuning in. Let's jump into today's show. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining me. This one, I don't know why I've taken so long actually to put it together and to speak about it. And I'm not actually sure why I'm doing it on my own either. I should really have my sort of adventure partner in crime, as I guess we are, with me, Rob Jones. However, I am here, I'm on my own, and I'm going to walk you through or talk you through this adventure that we had together. Another one of the adventures that we had together. We have quite a lot of adventures together. Everyone in life needs someone who is willing to say yes to some of, I've got to phrase this a little bit carefully, but who's willing to say yes to an idea that at the time might seem a little bit unconventional, but you know it's going to make you a little bit better as a human being. And I'm Rob's and he's mine. I've got another couple of people, or we have another couple of people within our sort of community that are similar kind of humans. They're great people. They don't normally ask too many questions. They never look for ways as to why you can't do something. Rather, they just look directly for how you can, or they just say yes and we set a date. This idea was actually what I call a COVID idea. It was during COVID that I was on my own for 4 months. Those of you who follow the show will probably know some of the shows in that time were very, very odd. Go back, have a listen to them. Some of them that I did on my own. Fortunately, a lot of people helped me out. But there were times where I kind of was losing my mind a little bit. I was locked up in my own house. As many people were, I wasn't different from a lot of people around the world. However, I didn't have anyone else. Holly was locked in Australia for 4 months. I was locked in Satwa for 4 months. We were trying to move the gym, build the business, keep the team, trying to find a way to, anyway, it was a whole long story. And one of my releases, why is that important? Because I needed releases. We all kind of need release and areas where we can switch off. And I decided I didn't want to fill my days with the news, scrolling social media, news channels, all this kind of stuff. I wanted to fill part of my days, or as much as possible, which on some days was not very much at all, but often was quite a lot. I think some days I was somewhere around 2 hours of inspirational content. And I found inspirational content over on YouTube. I could search for kind of what I was looking for. And if I didn't like it, as you can still do in these days, you don't have to just scroll through Instagram the whole time like a lot of us are caught doing. But YouTube offered me a lot. I could scroll back to or search back to a lot of sort of old expeditions. And that's what my search genre generally was. It was a lot in adventure. And from K2, from Everest to mountain biking to running and all of this stuff. And of course, what this did is it gave me this burning desire to travel to different countries, to cross them on foot, to cross them on bikes, to climb mountains. And then I was like, well, this is a bit shit because we're in this thing called lockdown. So instead of sitting there and thinking this is a bit shit and then watching stuff that didn't help me, I continued to watch it. And I continued and continued. I had all these great ideas and these great plans. We'd go to this country, we'd go to that country. Until this point, one day where I turned around and I went, hang on a minute. We could do a super cool adventure like this in our own country that we live in the United Arab Emirates. We have here believe it or not, a pretty decent size mountain range. The highest point is the top of the UAE, the roof of the UAE, and it borders with Oman up in Ras Al Khaimah. Jebel Jais is the name of the mountain. You might have heard me speak about that before. I actually did a show about places to get out in the UAE and play a little bit. And that mountain sits somewhere, it depends which peak you go to. There's all these sort of different peaks, and that sounds a bit odd in that there can only be one peak. Yes, technically there can only be one peak, but there's the peaks that are open to the public, and there's the peaks that are not open to the public, and there's the peaks that are not open to the public, but the public, or some of us public, get to. Not sure I should be saying that. However, it's around 1,800 meters above sea level, which is a pretty decent peak. And this point in this mountain range is called the Hajar Mountains. And I had a look at the map, and the Hajar Mountains essentially split the east and the west coast of the UAE. On the east side, you've kind of got Fujairah, Khor Fakkan, and then if you go further down, you go down to Oman. And on the west side, you've got all the other Emirates, really: Ras Al Khaimah, Ajman, Sharjah, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. You've got Al Quwain up there as well, all those sort of northern Emirates. And this ridgeline of mountains kind of runs down between the two. If you look at a map, it'll make it a lot easier, and I'll stop explaining. It then gets to a point in an area called Meliha where it then becomes sand. So you've got about 200 kilometers of a mountain range, and then as the bird flies, and pretty much doesn't matter if you go as per the bird or as by the roads, there is about another 100 to 120k of just like flat desert that you can cross, or you can go on the road. So I was looking at this map whilst getting inspired out of my mind, trying not to get depressed out of my mind during COVID that I was all on my own and I couldn't get out anywhere. And I was like, how cool would it be to run from the top of the UAE all the way back to the gym? And I started mapping it out, and as I sort of gave away there, it's about the first bit in the mountains is around 200 kilometers, and then there's about another 100 kilometers across desert to get to the gym. And I was like, whoa, that's a 300k run, which sounds pretty awesome. And so I started to try and plot it, and in doing so, I contacted a friend or an acquaintance. There aren't many people that I know or knew that would know this route, but one guy, Pete, I knew that he might know something, and I knew a little bit, and he actually super kindly gave me his time and came into the gym, met me, and we had a big discussion about it, and he went away and he came back with this GPX file. GPX file is like a GPS file. It shows you the route. So all you have to do is load it onto your watch or onto your GPS device, whatever that is, and you should be able to follow it. However, he said to me, I think most of this is passable. And this kind of happens a lot in this kind of space. When someone's plotting a route, they'll never say, deja vu, you might have heard Rob and I talk about this a lot. We'll say, we think it's passable, but what you see on Google, and no matter what, all the maps are generally fed by Google. So no matter what platform you look on, the feed is coming from Google for the most part. What you see on there and what you actually get in reality might not be the same, especially in areas like this where the roads might have washed out from rain. There might have been some construction that Google Maps hasn't quite picked up yet. So he gives it to me and he says, this is the route. It's 301k, and I think it's mainly passable. So Rob and I sort of sat down and started looking at it, and we're like, this is going to be super cool to run. We can just get our bags on our back and we can just gun it in one hit, sleep when we need to sleep, and just sort of keep moving. We knew that we had to do it when it was a little bit cooler weather, because some of the areas from where there's water, so aid station basically, or actual supplies, to the next place where there's supplies would be too far and too dangerous to do when it's hot, because we wouldn't be able to carry enough supplies, mainly water. We'd always be able to carry enough food, but we wouldn't be able to carry enough water, and if something did go wrong, we would be compromising our safety, which is what we're obviously trying to stay away from doing at all times. We might seem like a couple of idiots, but our families mean something to us, and we want to, it's always a better story if you can come back and you can actually tell it rather than if you don't. So we knew that we had to, or we were going to do this when it was a little bit cooler. And the best way to sort of figure out if the route was passable would be to test certain sections of it. So that's basically what we did. From September of 2020, we just started running various sections of the route just to have a look and to train and to make sure it was passable. And we realized very fast that the route was absolutely awesome all through the Hajar Mountains, was brilliant, rolling, mainly on Jeep track. Some of it we'd run before. We'd run about 100K of it before. Quite technical and single trail, and that's where it's really sort of a lot of elevation and quite remote, no supplies. But the route was actually absolutely awesome, and it took us on some really, really great training runs. As things go, we're out on one of those training runs, and it was early December of 2020, and I was coming down one of the steep descents, and essentially my quad gave out a little bit, which went into my knee, and I picked up quite a nasty injury, which then didn't heal super fast. So into 2021, which put off the 2021 window of the winter season. So we had a window of basically January till about end of Feb, beginning of March time, because after that, as you know, if you live here in Dubai, it's 30 plus degrees in the day and it's just not going to work. And I hadn't recovered from that injury. And obviously we're naturally both a little bit disappointed. We'd trained since September. We'd come out of COVID pretty good shape because that's all there was to do except stress and manage a business. During COVID, we did a lot of training, so we're in good shape. We were really ready for it until sort of December, and I got this injury, and I turned around to Rob and I was like, mate, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to sort of put this thing on ice. And his immediate response was like, that's okay, mate. It really doesn't matter. There's no rush. The route's always going to be there, which is, again, why you need a good friend and a good expedition partner, adventure partner to do this stuff with, that just doesn't make any stress for the fact that something supernatural's come along. I understand that sometimes if people are dialed into races, it becomes a little bit more stressful, but there's a really good chance that that race will run again next year, or there'll be another race similar. So there shouldn't be this stress around it. Obviously, I think I was a little bit disappointed that it happened, but very fast when I think I was more disappointed that I'd let Rob down than anything else. So when he was okay with it, I was like, oh, okay, then that's super cool, and I'll just get well, and we'll figure out if we do it next winter. Next winter next winter came 2021, and I don't actually remember why, but we never really spoke about it. And I'm much of the opinion that if it doesn't come naturally, there's no need to force it, and there's a lot of different, some quite rude sort of thoughts and phrases you could build around that, but it just didn't happen. And we got into 2022, and I think it was at the end of 2021 when I bought a mountain bike. And early in 2022, Rob bought a mountain bike as well. And I think it was about halfway through 2022 when I thought, actually, it'd be way faster and as much fun. And I don't know, it'd be less painful or more painful, but this route is almost passable. And that's quite an important detail. This route is almost passable on a mountain bike. So I'd get the route out, I'd get it back up on sort of all the various GPS platforms, load it in, try and really zoom in onto detail, go back to what I remembered, all the test runs that we'd had, areas that were a little bit sketchy, areas that I knew that there was no way we could pass on a mountain bike. We had a look in those areas, and we were like, okay, can we go round? What does that mean? Does it mean more climbing, less climbing? Is it dangerous? Is there roads? What exactly is going on? And actually, there wasn't any option for the places where it was either too steep or really sort of gnarly single track trail. There was no option to go around. So we were sort of looking at each other and looking at the route and going, yeah, maybe we'll just go through this. And then the whole sort of adventure, it almost starts to have a different turn to it, because it's like, wow, this is actually going to be like a hell of an adventure, because it's not only mountain biking, it's hiker biking as well, which if you've seen some of our videos, you probably think that's what we do every single weekend, but it's not really always like that. But you're going out and you're going onto this course that you know is not all passable on a bike. You know you're going to have to sort of hike around various areas, and it brings a certain amount of, I just think it brings an increased amount of adventure, which is super awesome as well. So we looked at each other and we're like, well, let's do it. And of course, there are certain considerations on dates, and we're just like, it was like the first weekend of December. It was the first weekend that we'd had that there was nothing on. It was like, it wasn't even a weekend. It was just after the weekend. It was Monday. And the week before, I sent our driver here at the gym, I sent him a message and said, you need to be at the gym at 5 a.m. on the Monday morning. And so we got here, and he didn't ask why. I don't know what I'd have told him if he did ask why. And we loaded the bikes onto the roof of my car. He sat in the back, Rob and I sat in the front. We drove an hour and a half to the top of Jebel Jais, which is quite nice. And mentally, that was actually quite nice because we knew we were starting at the top and we knew we were starting downhill, although it didn't pan out quite like that because you can't drive, that's what I was saying earlier, you can't drive all the way to the top. You have to park, and then you can ride a bit more, and then you get to the top, and then you spin round. So it's like 4K or 5K directly out of the car, up, before you could turn around and come down. But mentally, we've got I'm just looking at it here, it's about a 30K sort of downhill start, which is super, super nice. We get out of the car and we strap on the bikes, we strapped the saddlebags to the bikes. We took a couple of different bits and pieces that we were thinking we were going to need, like a jacket, because it might get cold if we sleep. We had intentions of sleeping. Well, we didn't really have intentions, but we thought we might need to sleep. We get all the bikes ready, and I give the car keys to the driver, and I said to him, cool, mate, we'll see you tomorrow. And he had this really blank look on his face, and he said, pardon? I said, yeah, just drive back, and the car needed servicing. I said, just take the car for service and then just leave it at the gym, and we'll pick it up in a few days. He's like, boss, what are you going to do? And Rob just started laughing, and I turned around and I said to him, we're just going to ride back to the gym. And his face became even more blank. He couldn't believe it. And he's like, okay. And he drove the car off. Rob and I sat there on the side of the road, just sat on our bikes, getting ready to start, absolutely pissing ourselves, thinking this guy must think we're absolute idiots. And we got on our bikes and we rode to the top of Jebel Jais. So we started with a lot of humor, and most of the time we try and make it as humorous. It's not a load of fun the whole way, but I always think in these scenarios you can choose to laugh, or you can let the pain and the toughness suck the life out of you, and then your only option left is to be miserable and cry, but you're still in the same scenario, so you might as well laugh. And that's where Rob is really good, because he just laughs the whole time. And we've got this almost unwritten rules, or this unwritten understanding that we just sort of say yes to each other. And he'll say, I want to stop and eat something. I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. And I'll say, I want to stop and eat something. He'll be like, yeah, that's cool. And so that's kind of how this trip went. The first 30 kilometers was exactly as I said. We go nicely downhill. It's pretty straightforward. Had a really beautiful flyover from, I don't know, some plains, like almost red arrows just as we got off the mountain or down into the valley. We're like, these guys are here for us. And as we rounded the corner and we hit the wadi, we knew that we were actually getting close to the first absolutely mayhem climb. And it was about 7K down the wadi, and then the road goes up. It goes about 20% for 4.5K. And in our minds, we were like, this could be quite a good challenge because we're still fresh. We could probably cycle up this. And after about 2 minutes, we realized that we would be walking, pushing our bikes, which the bikes were only loaded because they only had a few things in the saddlebags. They're probably only loaded about 4 or 5 kilos, so they weren't that heavy at all. But we pushed the bikes it literally took an hour to get up the first climb. And we've used this trail quite a lot for training for ultras. And we knew that at the top, it wasn't down and it wasn't rideable. We knew that it was all single trail for another 5K, which it does sort of play on your mind, because as we were going up this climb, it was super, super hot, and climbing up a dusty Jeep track, pushing your bike as the sun's coming up in mountain biking shoes it's not uber discomfortable, but it's not uber comfortable. So I don't know where you want to sit with that, but it's not the best experience. And when you get to the top, you've got across this ridge another 3 or 4K of it. And we got to the top, and I was sat at the top, and I was about 100 meters ahead of Rob, and I was just sat there looking down, and he just got there and he goes, "Well, that was good fun, wasn't it?" And I was like, it was awesome. And it actually genuinely was, because you have to accept the fact that you're not going to ride the bike. You have to push it, and it's going to take about an hour, but you're going to get to the top. It's quite unique. So we had a little bit of food and water, and then we were just like, well, should we go to the next section? And that was a lot of fun, because we were actually trying to ride on it whilst not crashing. Super dangerous up there, because if you crash, there's nowhere to bail out, and the rocks are actually really bloody sharp. So that was another sort of hour and a half of our lives that was probably a little bit too risky. But again, we were safe and we were sure. You then come off the top of Wadi Nakab, go down through Nakab, all the way around, hit this insane truck road, which goes through all the quarries out towards Taween, if anyone cares or anyone wants to try this. There is another way to do it. You can go up Cat, which is a savage climb, but it doesn't last for very long. And you can try and connect. You can connect on foot to Taween, sort of mountain range, I would call it, near Jebel Yabir. However, that's another 3K of hiker bike, which is uber sketchy. We've done it before. We actually did it a little bit kind of in a training ride, and we decided that was probably a little bit dangerous or a little bit sort of not smart to go through. But our other option was through all the quarries. So we're riding, I remember it so clearly, we're riding into a headwind, loads of trucks with just dust. They're not going super fast at all. We're actually trying to sit behind them, and some of them were going too slow for us to sit behind. But because it's a quarry, there's all this sort of rock powder coming out, and it's absolutely it's just like you're inhaling this like sand. It's really fine stuff. The wind's blowing hard in our face, and I'm putting out pretty much as much power as I can and going about 12 Ks an hour. That was a pretty good time. And again, this is one of the problems of knowing the course, because you know how long it's going to last for. And at the same time, you can just lock in and it's like, okay, it's 3K. And you look down and you're like, it's 2.9K. And you look down a few minutes later and it's like, it's just not going down. But that was a really quite a unique area. We then went through some really beautiful wadis all through Taween, and then down into, where did we get to? For dinner, we ended up actually in Masafi. Before that, around sunset. And this is when these things get a little bit interesting. When the sunset on the first day, again, we're making pretty good progress. We're averaging around 14 kilometers an hour, which doesn't sound super fast. It's not. Hiking a bike up a hill and across a ridge, you do not go super fast. So to average 14 Ks an hour was actually, we were really, really happy with it. It all hits in a little bit when the sun starts to set. We're in this grocery store in this really small sort of village, and these kids came over to us and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" They spoke pretty good English actually, to say that we're out in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, we're just riding to Dubai. And like, it's hard. Like, what else do you say? We're out for a bike ride. It's like 6 p.m., getting dark. We're putting the lights on our bikes. We're covered in shit. Dust, people can see that we've been going a long time. They're like, "Where did you come from?" We're like, what do we say? Like, we didn't come from around the corner. We don't want to lie. We're like, "Oh, we've come from Jebel Jais." And then they go around the back and they obviously tell their friends or the grocery store owner, and they all come out and they're all taking pictures of us and like, you're gonna ride to Dubai? You've come from Jebel. We're like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. They're like, "When will you get there?" And we looked at each other and we sort of just started laughing. We're like, yeah, we're not sure. So we're trying to explain to Arabic kids who speak some decent English, but really can't get what's going on. It's quite a unique moment. And as we drove away from that grocery store into absolute darkness, then things start. You've come from this massive high and you take all this energy from these guys, but then you're in the night and you're riding through wadis and it's pitch black, which has the amazing challenge that your mind has to be on the whole time. Otherwise, you're straight up going over the handlebars. You don't see so far ahead of you that you can see if there's a climb coming. You don't see so far ahead of you that you can see there's a boulder in the way. You don't see that there's a decline. Your eyes are literally super wide open the whole time. So cognitively, you're just draining. Every sense you've got is just getting drained by the second. And then you're riding uphill and you're having to put more energy through your legs. It's absolutely awesome and super, super unique. So we get through all these mountains, and every time we pull over, we have the same sort of thing. Like, people are looking at the bikes. They're asking, what's going on? How much are these bikes? What are you guys doing? And we had some nice dinner in Masafi, and then we left Masafi. And a few hours later, not even a few hours, probably about 90 minutes later, we came through this. It wasn't even a village. It was just this place. And there was a cafe on the side of the road. It was about 10 o'clock at night, served specialty coffee and like these like donut roll things. And we saw them on the menu and we're absolutely starving because we took not much food with us and we just ate along the way. And we sat at the side of this cafe, 10 o'clock at night, having a coffee and one of these donut rolls, just going, well, this is pretty good. This is the adventure that we wanted. We then went to... Where did we go to from there? Then we went on this another quarry road. Quarry roads, pitch black, is rough. Like, it's really rough. You are getting, now you can't even see in front of you. It's just like a fog with your head torch. Fortunately, we got through there and we got to the end. For the folks that know Shoka, we got to the end of Shoka, which is normally a really busy area. And we knew this wadi was about sort of 15K long. And this was the absolute, I think it was one of the highlights. It was pitch black. It was uber technical. So all the sensors back on and we're hitting stuff left and right. I don't know how either of us did not come off. It was just absolutely wild. Through Shoka, we go to this bit that we'd trained before. We'd run it before. We'd cycled it before. And both times we both freaking hated it. And I don't know, it totally, I think because we'd done it, and this is why I think training hard is super important, and doing hard things in training is super important, because when we did it as part of the route, it was really quite straightforward. It was nowhere near as hard as I remember it being when I ran it, and it was nowhere near as hard as I remember it being when we rode it. And there was a headwind. And suddenly we were literally out, and we were through Melija. So we were through all the mountain stages. We're like, how is that over already? It was really weird. It was just coming just after midnight. Then we had a little bit of route dilemma, because we knew that we couldn't ride and we didn't want to push our bikes 15K on the sand. So we had to pull the route forward onto this other road near Margam. And I looked on the map and I was like, there's this road here. And this is when stuff got a little bit funky. And you know it's going to get a bit funky when you can't really see, you don't know how long the road is. You can't really see far enough ahead. There's street lights, and for about 5 or 10 minutes, neither of us have spoken a word to each other. We're just literally pedaling and pedaling. I saw the road lights ahead, and I thought I saw the end, because it was almost like the road had come to a T-junction and the lights had turned to the right. But I knew we were going right, but I didn't realize that there was no lights going left. So it wasn't a T-junction. It was just a bend in this road. And we must have been on this road for about an hour and a half, spoke literally 2 words to each other. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, for sure, it would have been way easier to push the bikes or try and ride the bikes across the sand. What are we actually doing here? And finally, I saw the end. And when I saw the end, I was like, this can't be the end. And your mind is starting to play games on you. And I was like, then I saw there was these lights about 1K away. There was an Emirat petrol station. And I was like, I know this road. There's definitely not an Emirat petrol station on this road. And I said to Rob, I said, can you see there's an Emirat petrol station? And he's like, yeah, there is. I was like, are you sure? He goes, yeah, there's definitely one. 1 or 2K, 5 minutes down the road, we pull into this brand new Emirat petrol station. And it was the most beautiful. I'm not saying this just because I was smoked. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. It might have been even later. It might have been about 4 in the morning. I was absolutely smoked. I was like, this is absolutely incredible. Coffee, food, toilets. It was just like everything. Why do I share this? The reason is that section was probably the hardest section for both of us. And to get out of it, we could have stopped, we could have rested, but we would have still had to get out of it. So to get out of it, all we did was just kept moving. We didn't talk, we just put our heads down. We had no clue that at the end there was going to be a gas station, but there was one, and that was our reward. And it was absolutely insane. We sat in this gas station, we refilled all our supplies, had food, had a coffee, and we're like, we wonder, and we started to calculate it on the map. It was like 45, 50 Ks away. We wonder if we can get to the gym by sunrise. And this was literally the first time we sort of said we'll get there somewhere around the 24-hour mark. We're like, we set off at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're like, we'll get there by 8, 9 the next day. This was the first time that we challenged ourselves and we said, I wonder if we can get there before sunrise. And then it was all on. Did that mean that we hadn't challenged ourselves before? Not at all. We challenge ourselves all the time. We're pushing as hard as we could. So it's not just because this is an adventure and there's no time targets that we're taking it easy. We literally only stop. We stop for lunch, we stop for dinner, we stop for a coffee, and now we're stopping at the gas station. And obviously we stopped to piss along the way. But we weren't stopping just to take pictures and have an adventure. We were pushing the whole way. But it doesn't mean that we were pushing for a time the whole time. In this gas station, we started pushing for a time. And I remember this was, hopefully Mum's not listening, this is when we actually had to go down the section of the Alain Road. It was quiet. It was like 4 in the morning. There was no trucks at all. Not dangerous. It actually wasn't super dangerous. We started going down the wrong way. So against the traffic to make it safer. And I was like, dude, this is, I don't feel safe at all. And we went on the other side and there's a massive hard shoulder. You wouldn't recognize it unless you needed it. And on that day we needed it. We came into the back of Lassalle, which is where Skydive Dubai is. Across the camel farm, got completely lost in all the camel farms in Lassalle. And then you actually pop out on Jebel Ali Labab Road. And just before we got onto that, we went illegally through a massive chicken feed farm, something or other, and just went past the security guys as we left and said, thanks a lot for allowing us to trespass. And they had no clue what we were doing. That was quite an interesting moment. Then we skirted down Jebel Ali Labab Road. And as we were on there, the sun started to rise and we were still about 15 Ks away from the gym. So we kind of lost the little target that we had, a little target that we put in the petrol station. But honestly, riding the last sort of hour from there with the sun rising, we rode down Al Qudra Road, down onto the stick, and then in the back through the gym was probably some of the most enjoyable. Something about that time of day in the morning. If you're a morning person, you'll massively appreciate it. It's absolutely beautiful. And we're like, holy shit, we've done this. We're like 10K away from the gym, and we've looked at the watch and we're like, we're going to be there just after 7, and we rolled in here to InnerFight just after 7, and people were just getting on with what they normally get on with at that time of day. I think Holly had just finished a workout. She came out and she was tired, so she just kind of said, well done, and went back and put her equipment away, and that was fine. We had an acai bowl, a couple of cups of coffee, and went home to bed. And that's what it should be like. There's no need for a big fanfare. Obviously, we made a nice video about it, which I'll link in the show notes, a nice YouTube sort of mini documentary on how it went down. So hopefully we can inspire other people to do some quite interesting things that challenge them. It was a huge challenge. It was tough. Riding a mountain bike, it ended up not being 301 kilometers. It ended up being 345 kilometers. And it took us 23 hours and 10 minutes. So what are the key takeaways? What did I really learn from doing this? Number one, we thought of things in COVID, and some of them were good things, some of them were not good things. But I think a lot of us had a lot of great ideas in COVID. All I want to encourage you to do is to go back to those ideas, go back to your notebooks at some stage, have a look at the good stuff, and ask yourself, have I done it? If not, why not? And is there a chance it's still a pretty good goal? Number two, which fits in with that, is that sometimes it's okay to delay your goals. You set a timeline, I got an injury, Rob was fine with postponing it, and we actually end up doing it on bikes. So we actually changed the mode completely. But what we did, and this is a massive takeaway as well, we remembered why we set out to do it. We set out to do it because it was fun, because it was an adventure, and also, which is a huge takeaway, is we wanted to normalize the fact that you can create adventure in your own backyard. Not everyone has the Agile Mountains that we've got, but there's something pretty much somewhere or close to you, no matter where you are. You just have to think a little bit laterally. And if you're missing or short of ideas, maybe give us a shout, and maybe we've got some ideas. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway is it was an adventure, and adventures are always good fun. There were certain hard bits, but those hard bits are massively offset by the personal satisfaction that we both got out of it and the time that we had. It was super good fun. Hopefully that's helpful. I hope it has made you think about maybe what you could do. I definitely don't think 345 Ks on a mountain bike is good for everyone's gooch. Mine got away pretty much scot-free. But there are certain things that you can create, or we can definitely help you create, that challenge you and enable you to have quite good fun and let you do something that to you, and this is not special to anyone else, but to Rob and I, it was quite a nice special 23 hours of riding our mountain bikes. Thanks a lot for listening. I'll catch you next week.